So again, just to reiterate, we're gonna reflect back and report back from the three groups about what was shared, starting with.
I knew that was gonna happen. So I was taking notes in our group and kind of doing sketches of the objects that people brought in. And what kind of struck me was that despite like the different manifestations of these objects, that primarily they were reflections on how our identities connect to those objects and move through space. So people were talking about images of where they were from or articles that like a mentor gave them, and how those things that they carry with them through life ultimately start to inform the way that they act in the world. Sorry, I'm getting a little caught up. And what was really interesting was, actually this might actually speak to your point. Someone was talking about our breath and how breathing is connected to our sense of being and our embodiment of our identities in space. And that through breathing exercises, we can start to reconnect with, I think, a deeper purpose and kind of bring that energy and that calmness, that passion into the world.
Thank you. Our group also spoke about space, the idea of safe space, the idea of silence in a space, being courageous in a space, and then it also sort of transitioned into actual physical space. So the sort of emotional, psychological ideas of like listening and telling a story, and then also the challenges and demands of finding a physical space in which to tell that story, and how to sort of continue and create a dialogue that exists in the corporal and sort of like metaphysical world. We had some really, really fascinating sort of artifacts that were brought in. There was a glass bowl, an actual lease that had been whited out. And one of the artists in our group is gonna create this whole project about designing their own lease and sort of creating what the ideal space would be. Someone is actually looking for space for their group. And then it sort of transitioned again into this idea of our last object, which sparked this idea of this paradox of creation in terms of how to teach something you don't know how to teach but feel really inspired by, which I thought, I'm an actor, and I thought, gosh, I really understand that. And I think this idea of trying to create something without the agenda necessarily of what it will become, I thought really spoke to this idea. So once we've established space and we've found a real space to put it in, now what do we make with all of these wonderful tools we've now been able to amass? I thought that was where I sort of could feel the conversation in our group going, and I was sort of really energized about that. So hopefully maybe that's something else we can all come up with an idea of. Okay, that was, yeah.
Our group, I really need to look at my notes because I don't remember anything. We didn't really actually get to the artifacts so much because we spent a lot of time reflecting on each other and where we were from, and kind of used that as a jumping off point. And part of what was interesting was that us being all together in New York now, no matter where we were from, that kind of became a centralized point of where were you from, what was your experience there, and what has been your experience in this place, either growing up in this place and also coming here as someone from another place. And what the commonalities were, what the disconnects were, how those things could be brought together. We also kind of started out talking through one of the people in our group, Aisha, who brought up her work, which was kind of creating this theater group that used the concept of the end of the world and used the concept of zombies and as a kind of a jumping off point to talk about various different things. Serial was brought up at a certain point, experiences of communities with intense levels of violence was brought up. And then we kind of started talking about what it means to be a zombie in this culture, what it means to be desensitized to the concept of violence, what it means to choose not to be desensitized, and what that choice involves in terms of everyday action, both with yourself and with others. We had many educators in our group, including Shah, who's started many of his own schools, and he talked to us about that experience, and we talked a lot about what the roles of educators were in terms of speaking to the experiences of their students, as well as encouraging the and kind of allowing the concept of choice to thrive in their students, to figure out what are these things that one can control, what are the things that one cannot control, and kind of taking the aspects that you can control and shaping your own destiny as much as possible. And yeah, I think the last things that we kind of used that to talk about was just embracing who you are in all aspects and using that as a jumping off point for your art, because the most honest point is that you can come from is yourself, and trying to be as honest with yourself about where you come from and who you are is a good place to start when creating art.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask anyone who was asked to read Sekou's piece for the citizenship lunch, could they come up and stand? All the poets, we're going to read the piece. So you could just stand right here. And I'm going to walk you through what the citizenship lunch is going to entail. Oh, great. I'm flanked. So the citizenship dinner is a very important aspect of the research and performance method. And Sekou and MAP and others use this method to help develop the 51st Dream State project. We saw a glimpse of it in the Finding 51st Dream State video that we just watched. I had the honor of performing a citizenship supper, because it was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon here at the new school, with my students in the class that I taught this semester. And unfortunately, because of time restraints and the busyness of people's schedules, a lot of students weren't able to bring food to our citizenship supper. But we did have some really awesome conversation and discussion, very much in line with what you saw in that video. So I'm gonna read this excerpt from this awesome booklet more about what this process is and what it entails. And then we're gonna hear a piece from Sekou that was inspired by September 11th. As you may have heard in the Finding 51st Dream State video, the events of September 11th were a huge catalyst. Catalyst is a big buzzword today. Were a big catalyst for Sekou to get him thinking critically about meanings of American identity and citizenship. And here we are, 2 days after the 12th anniversary of September 11th. So it's very appropriate that we hear this piece in particular. So all these wonderful poets and artists and educators are gonna read pieces of it. And what I'm gonna ask you all to do is to think about the issues that arise in this piece critically going into the next portion of the day, which is lunch, which is food, which is laid out over there on that table. So let me just read this excerpt from the methodology booklet. What is a citizenship dinner? The creation of a citizenship dinner builds on a series of community events that Sekou Sundiata organized as he developed the 51st Dream State. Citizenship dinners are public gatherings that combine the intimacy of personal storytelling with community participation in order to generate creative dialogue around ideas of citizenship and belonging. The events are organized around potluck dinners held in private homes or in community spaces. After a shared reading of a poem, participants share their experiences of citizenship, community, freedom, family, and place. Responding to a poem in this way sheds light on people's different relationships to language, history, and culture. It puts the past and the present and future in motion. Through personal memory and storytelling, individuals come together to talk, to laugh, to disagree, and to see themselves as connected to each other and empowered to act in public ways for the public good. So without further ado, I'm gonna, I should have had you stand in order. Yeah.
Actually, I don't need it.
Go for it. Go for it. Oh, actually, you do need it because we're recording you.
So just to reiterate, also, the poem is in the program. You can follow along with this poem in the program. As it's reading.
And because I get to be the first to read, I'd like everybody to just, when I say go, say the name, the first two words of the poem with me. When I point up, say it nice and loud and nice and clear. Is everybody ready?
Donny Hathaway.
One more time.
Donny Hathaway.
Was explaining, for all we know, on the radio. And all the trouble in the world came down to the essential energies, swirling like tea leaves in the bottom of a cup.
In the early days of the aftermath, I was in hiding from the lost army of protest, calling from the 20th century for something boisterous and skinny on the page.
I began my heresy with the scratch and whisper of number 2 lead, spelling out the opening line, from instinct to hand to eye, earth, water, fire, air.
Later that morning, I gathered myself in a thin rush hour to Manhattan. The inbound train stalled in a tunnel, and we sat in abeyance. By consensus, it seemed. No one spoke or complained. I drifted off into the commuter's dream.
The George Washington Bridge crumbles into the Hudson River. The city buckles from the cloisters to South Ferry and collapses eye to eye. With its forgotten underlife, I follow horse trails through secret pathways. Indigenous ghost caves and African burial grounds. A wawanko echoes down the streets. The untouchables and enchanters doo-wop and do-rag in a spot of starlight, like they don't know they're dead, as if to say, see that star, see that light? This is what we always wanted to be.
The rivers come crashing through the river walls, and the fish begin their tales por el día de recuerdo, when the voice of God, which once said, transcend, and then said, expand, and now saying, wow. In an American Creole, both mystical and clear, through history's anesthesia, I came to my feet at the Wall Street station and walked towards the door like a reluctant witness to the witness stand. The crater recalled a lonely planet, a pockmarked moon of ridges and man-sized valleys, earth movers, dump trucks and cranes. A priest kneels in the powdered ash. A rescue stops for the Holy Ghost and the angel of death to cross paths. Someone calls for the jaws of life, earth, water, fire, air. The Ellington blue sky pours over the harbor. The burning isms curl black smoke into its soft watercolors.
I stood citizen to citizen with the crowd, 3 rows deep. A man filled with the daily news matching pictures to the scene. A couple in a doorway argued hip-hop versus R&B in times like these. They look up from their ideologies to agree Mercury must be in retrograde. A woman to my right worried a flag the size of a handkerchief, the kind you get at the fairgrounds. A little Emmett Till came to me, a face that long ago cured my schoolboy faith in that lyric, so that I could no longer sing with the voice of praise as it was my own. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies.
I walked the avenues of the Americas past the photocopy gallery of the missing and the dead mounted on the buildings. In store windows and lobbies, posted on barricades along the streets, I searched for familiar faces and I found a few, but the names were wrong, yet I knew them all by their fictions.
The light-hearted Capricorn from Seven Hills playing with her cat on a crate and barrel sofa.
the Hindu newlyweds who immigrated from India to be in the Empire State, Nestor, the brother of Milagros, menacing the lens ringside at the gym, a Miss Trinidad lookalike caught in a calypso on Eastern Parkway, and a pensive man in one of his moods, red, black, and blue at the root.
I could see my own anonymous face in that show, pasted above a word or two above my love of swimming in the ocean and my weakness for sentimental ballads. Where what's missing and gone is half the song. I drowned in a flood of burning jet fuel. Down was looking like up when I jumped with my brains on fire. I ran from the falling towers and wandered for days. I followed horse trails through secret pathways. A priest kneels in the powdered ash.
The Holy Ghost and the angel of death cross paths. Someone calls for the jaws of life, earth, water, fire, air.
So here are some questions to get us thinking about the meanings of this poem, and it can have many different meanings. But again, remember the goal for a citizenship dinner or a lunch or any kind of potluck that is connected to this methodology is to tell stories, right? And to get your own personal experiences out there and to connect and share with other people. So that's what we're gonna ask you to do while we eat lunch for the next segment. I just want you to be thinking about these questions. I'm gonna read them out loud now. And we're not gonna do this in any kind of formal way, but we just ask that you think about these things and hopefully share and connect with others in this space. You know, sometimes we grab lunch at a conference like this and go outside and eat in the courtyard by ourselves or something like that. Today we're gonna ask that you connect with somebody like you did earlier today as Razu led us, and think about these questions and think about this piece and have a conversation, a critical conversation around it. So those questions are, what is your first citizenship memory? Who are the parents of your American identity? If every person who called themselves American was in one room, what would they have in common? How do your other identities interact with your American identity? When and where are your citizen feelings their strongest? In the polling booth, at a place of worship, at a desk, in a mall, during the Super Bowl, or on a bus? And again, try to think about these things in a way that, as they said in the video, isn't high-mindedly philosophical, right? In a way that's personal and connects to you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you to all those who read the poem. I think now we are ready to eat. So please feel free to grab some food.